Welcome to Whisperwood Stories. Today, we read 3 stories from r/paranormal. Let's begin. Our first story is from Top Antelope. That night at a hotel, which still gives me nightmares. This was back in 2014 to 2015. I was around 8 or 9 years old, and my family, my aunt, grandma, grandpa, my mom, and some of my aunt's friends went to this beach, which is quite famous in the country that I live in. It was supposed to be a 3-day, 2-night trip. Everything was fine. I don't know why, but I didn't like the hotel that we booked. Not at all. It wasn't because of the appearance or hospitality. Rather, it was because of the creepy feeling that I got in there. And it was so creepy that even after so long, I can clearly remember what happened and what I felt. I did tell my mother that I didn't like the hotel, but she probably thought that it was just a child's tantrum or something. For 2 complete days in this hotel, I suppressed the feeling of someone watching me. The exact feeling you get when someone is staring at you too intensely. I shook it off, but something happened on the last day of our stay here, and it still creeps me out on many different levels. It was night. Our luggage was packed. I was a kid, so I was sharing a room with my mother. We were sleeping, but suddenly the lights went off. My body temperature has been high ever since I was born. I even feel hot when the AC is on sometimes. I remember waking up while panting. I had woken up because of feeling hot, but I've never felt it quite this intensely before. It was suffocating heat, like someone or something was pressing down on my chest. I felt so hot, but I was unable to wake up. I could feel my back being drenched with sweat, but I was unable to open my eyes. Finally, after a while, I don't remember how long, I managed to open my eyes, and what I saw still haunts me to this day. My feet faced the balcony, and there was a window a bit further away from the door which led to said balcony. The curtains that were drawn to prevent streetlights from entering were pulled open. The window that was closed was open, and there was a person standing right outside. I couldn't see that person in the darkness, but I still remember those eyes. I couldn't see them, but I could feel them staring at me. They weren't very kind, rather. I would say that I could feel the malicious intent seeping out from them. I remember trying to scream out loud, but I couldn't. It was like the same feeling of something weighing down on me. I was so scared that I was probably trembling in fear. I don't know for how long it happened, but at some point, I remember shutting my eyes closed. And that's all I remember from that night. The next morning when I woke up, my mother saw that I was visibly scared and almost hysterical. I asked her about the lights that went out yesterday. She said there was nothing like that, and that if there had been, she would have noticed it. I told her everything, but she didn't believe me. Every single person I told didn't believe me, and rather took this as some sort of nightmare. But honestly speaking, though I was young, I can assure you that it wasn't a nightmare. A nightmare can't be that realistic. No one until this day believes me. And I too, at some point, stopped speaking about it. But I never actually forgot, and I don't think that I ever will. Maybe to other people, this doesn't seem very scary, but I still get nightmares about that very night. And I truly hope that I can forget about that cursed night, but I just can't. Our second story is from ExistentialUberRide. Voices in the Attic. So I'm 23 now, and this happened years ago, before I discovered the joys of the internet and places like this subreddit. That being said, when I was a kid, I suffered a lot from sleep paralysis. I never saw anything spooky while I was in these states, just, the general terror of being trapped under the weight of what feels like the entire universe. As I grew up, these experiences became less and less frequent. And when we moved into my grandmother's house, they ceased altogether. Even being freed from that burden, I could never quite sleep through an entire night without waking up due to some strange dream, or at least what I thought were dreams, until it happened every day for a month, and I got more and more tired as it went on. In these dreams, I would always hear faint whispers emanating from the end of the hall where the attic door was located. The voices would always be just loud enough for me to hear clearly, but never loud enough to wake up anyone else in the house. I remember this being strange, because my grandmother was notorious for hearing even the slightest sound and coming to check on my sister and I to make sure that we weren't roaming around the halls past our bedtime. Now, at first, the whispers were just white noise, mumbles. Hard to discern what was being said exactly, but clear enough to know that voices didn't belong to anyone in the house. Seeing as my sister and I shared the same room, it would have been simple to identify her as the source. And my grandmother had a distinct voice that refused to drop below a certain decibel. Each night for every month, I remember the voices growing more distant, until eventually I could make out what they were saying. It was my name, over and over again. Just my name followed by the simple instruction to follow, or come, or hurry. Each night they grew more adamant, until eventually I told my grandmother about it. My grandmother, being the uber-religious soul that she is, responded with some hokey story about a man in the Bible who suffered from something similar. Voices in the night constantly disturbing his sleep until finally he calls out to God and discovers that he's been ordained to higher things. The gist of her advice was to confront the voices in the attic and hope they were kind. Thinking back on this now, I should have stuck to my original plan and just hid in the covers until dawn. However, I figured my grandmother knew more about the world than I did, so I followed her advice. That night, when the voices started up on their usual chants, I promptly rolled out of bed and ignored every instinct of my 10-year-old mind, terrified of the dark, and forced myself out into the hallway. The voices weren't whispers anymore. If anything, at this point, they were even excitedly chattering their encouragement as I forged ahead towards God knows what at the end of the hallway. Good. Yes. Hurry. All mixed in the repetition of my name. Now, it was at this point where my courage faltered, and I found myself backpedaling to the safety of my room, because before I could reach the doorknob of the attic door, it swung open on its own. This was very wrong. The attic door was always stuck, and still is to this day. It always required a good amount of force to pull it open, even to the point that my grandmother can't open it on her own anymore. I wasn't brave enough to peer into the darkness, and some part of me wished that I had been. But as I turned tail to leave, I heard a voice say my name clear as day. "You're here." Needless to say, I was under my covers in a matter of seconds. The next morning, I got up, and sure as anything, when I looked down the hallway, the attic door was wide open, and it stayed that way until my grandmother shut it. I never heard the voices again after that, but I always wonder what was waiting for me there, and what might have happened if I'd stayed long enough to hear the voices out. Does anyone have any similar experiences? Anyone want to hazard a guess as to what it was? Our last story is from Dusk Muse. Apparently, I babysat more than one kid. When I was 13, I babysat a little girl named Emma, one of the sweetest kids you could think of. I had been her regular babysitter so much that if I couldn't babysit her for a few months, she would call the other babysitters by my name. The event of this post happened when I came back to be her babysitter again. It was about 10:30 at night. I had already put Emma to bed and had been channel surfing. The house was set up in a way that the front half was an open concept living room, dining room and kitchen side by side between the living room. The dining room was an open doorway that led to the back half of the house. At one end was Emma's room. The other end had her parents' room, with the bathroom connected to the parents' room. Now, while sitting on the couch, I heard something run down the hall to the bathroom. Assuming it was Emma just using the bathroom, I let it be for a few minutes. When that time passed, I heard feet heading back down the hall. I turned to tell her to go back and make sure that she had flushed the toilet, as I hadn't heard it. When I had turned, all I saw was the tips of black hair passing as something ran past the open doorway. Here was the problem, though. Emma is blonde. I quickly jumped up and rushed to Emma's bedroom, throwing open the door. Her nightlight was bright enough to make her out as she sat up and looked at me, rubbing her eyes in confusion. I asked her if she had went to the bathroom. When she shook her head, I did a once-over of her room, checking under the bed and a quick peek in her closet. I didn't see anything, and I just told Emma I was double-checking for monsters. I tucked Emma right back in, saying goodnight as I headed out of her room again, leaving it slightly open as I began to walk away. But I stopped when I heard Emma speaking. Thinking that she was going to ask me something, I turned to listen, only to hear,
"You should have said something. Don't scare her, I really like her."
I didn't say anything to the mom about this, and continued to babysit Emma until I moved away. I always made an effort after that, however, to include this other being. If Emma was drawing, an extra spot was set up. It seemed to make Emma happy, and nothing else ever startled me again. Thank you for listening to Whisperwood Stories. If you enjoyed, don't forget to comment, like, and subscribe down below. Do you have a story that you'd like me to read here? Or a subreddit recommendation? Consider commenting or sending it to whisperwoodsubmissions@gmail.com. Thank you again for listening, and be sure to check out the original Reddit posts. Don't let the shadows get too close.